The shout cut through the thick desert heat as the stallion bucked like lightning struck twice. A cowboy, second one that morning, flew backward through the dust, hit the fence with a crack of wood and bone, and landed in a heap of spurs and shame. Gasps rippled through the crowd gathered behind the saloon. Children leaned from their fathers' shoulders. Old men shook their heads. One woman fainted into the arms of a preacher who didn't bother to catch her. All eyes turned to the porch. There she stood, Widow Calder, black veil fluttering in the breeze, gloved hand resting on her hip like she was holstered herself. Behind her, tied to the rail and snorting steam, was the horse no one could tame. Judgment. 25, she said, voice smooth as a whetstone. That's 25 fallen men, Sheriff. Sheriff dumbly chewed the inside of his cheek. Maybe that's enough for now, Widow. She didn't blink. He ain't done. The stallion reared again, straining against the reins, eyes burning hellfire. A mare might have whinnied, Judgment roared. One of the local boys limped forward, hat in hand, shoulders still wrapped in a sling. Miss Calder, ma'am, if I could just try again. No, she said. You already lost once. Judgment don't forgive weakness. A murmur moved through the crowd. They weren't here for the ranch or the prize. They were here for the legend. That's when the wind shifted. Heads turned. He stood at the edge of the saloon shadow. Dust-covered, long coat like dry blood, boots cracked from 1,000 miles. His face mostly hidden beneath a low-brimmed hat. No one had seen him ride into town. He said nothing, just looked at the horse, then at the widow. Her eyes narrowed. You a cowboy? He didn't answer. You think you're different? She asked, stepping down off the porch. Her boots struck hard against the boards. That horse there has thrown men twice your size and men half your age. One of them had a medal from the governor. One had the gall to pray first. Still silence. She stopped 3 feet from him. You want the land, stranger? The coin? Or just the glory? A long pause. The wind caught the corner of his coat. Then he spoke low. Not here for any of that. Then why? She asked. He looked past her to the stallion. The animal pawed the dirt and snarled, nostrils wide. Because he hasn't met me yet. The crowd hushed. Somewhere, a poker chip dropped on a saloon table. She gave a slow nod and stepped aside. Well then, stranger, she said. If you're a real cowboy, prove it. The stallion lunged. Dust exploded from the corral floor as Judgment hit the end of the reins, hooves carving deep gouges in the dirt. The stranger didn't flinch. He walked forward slow, deliberate, like the earth owed him passage. Gasps shot through the crowd lining the fence. One child gripped his mother's skirt. A man cursed under his breath and stepped back. The reins snapped taut. Judgment reared, front legs thrashing the sky. The stranger stopped 3 paces short. Fool's dead already, someone muttered. But the stranger just stared up at the beast. Not in fear, not in challenge. In recognition, the stallion's snort echoed like distant thunder. They stood locked there, man and monster, with nothing between them but heat and breath. Then the stranger raised one hand, palm open, not reaching, just waiting. Talk into it, a drunk slur behind the fence. But Judgment didn't charge. He dropped to all fours, pacing in a slow, furious circle. The stranger moved with him, silent, steady, matching every step like a dance only the two of them knew. Then, without a sound, he stepped beside the stallion's flank and swung himself up. No saddle, no warning. He landed clean, boots planted firm, body low to keep balance. The crowd didn't breathe. Judgment exploded. The stallion bucked, twisted, jolted left, then right, trying to shatter the man on his back. Dirt flew in sheets. Blood from past riders still stained the corral fence. But the stranger moved with every motion, like he'd been there before. Not a yell, not a scream, not even a grip on the mane. Just balance, stillness, calm. Folks at the fence started whispering prayers. Then Judgment stopped. The stallion stood in the center of the corral, sides heaving, steam curling off his back. The stranger leaned forward, pressed a hand to the beast's neck, and whispered something no one could hear. Judgment bowed his head. Silence fell over Dead Mare Ridge. The stranger turned the stallion with the gentlest nudge of his boot and rode once around the circle, slow, deliberate, masterful. A war horse answering its rider. On the porch, Widow Calder's veil trembled in the breeze. Her jaw set hard, but her hands trembled. He rode back to the edge of the fence, swung down, and landed soft. No flourish, no grin. He walked past the fence, past the preacher and the sheriff, and stopped in front of the widow. "I'll take the job," he said. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Be ready by first light," she said. He tipped his hat and disappeared into the heat. Behind them, the stallion stood still waiting. The stranger dropped low behind a sandstone outcrop, drawing his revolver in silence. Widow Calder crouched beside him, rifle in hand, breath tight through her teeth. "He's one of the butcher scouts," she whispered. "They're close." The man didn't answer. He watched the ridge. A figure moved, just a flicker of motion against the rock. One shot. Clean. The scout folded without a sound. The widow stared at him. Not the shot, the way he moved. Like the bullet had already been counted before it left the barrel. They rose and kept riding. The trail twisted through broken country, the sun hanging low and angry in the sky. Dust clung to every breath, and Judgment's hooves hit the earth like war drums. "You've done this before," she said finally, voice low. He didn't look at her. Somewhere worse. A vulture drifted overhead, the only witness. They reached a dry riverbed. Blackened timbers jutted from the earth like broken ribs, the remains of an old bridge. She dismounted. "This was where they came through," she said, kicking at the char midnight raid. "We had 5 good hands. I woke to fire and screaming. My husband made it to the porch before the shotgun took him." He watched her face, not for tears, but for what was underneath. "They wanted the ranch?" he asked. "They wanted the pass. Calder land backs the south route. Good for running contraband. Bodies, too." The wind picked up, dry and sharp. "They call the leader Mercer Butcher," she continued. "Wears my husband's ring on a chain like a trophy." Judgment pawed the ground. "Then let's take it back," the stranger said. They rode again. The land climb grew meaner. Shadows gathered in the gulches. Buzzards scattered from the bones of old cattle left where they fell. Near dusk, a twisted cottonwood came into view. Beyond it, perched like a scar on the land, stood Calder Ranch. The roof sagged. Smoke trailed from the chimney. 5 horses tied out front. One man on the porch drinking from a jug. Another posted in the loft with a rifle. She drew breath through her nose. "That's Mercer's crew. All of them, except Mercer himself." The stranger studied the angles. "Main house has a back window." She nodded. "Ranch and shed. Burned down." He pulled his coat tighter. "We move at nightfall. You go first, drum out. I'll clean up behind." She hesitated. "Why help me?" He looked up at the last shred of sun bleeding behind the hills. "Because I've seen men like them win," he said. "Too many times." He drew a worn cloth from his coat, tied it around his hand. Faded army issue. Bloodstained. She saw the tremble in his fingers. The kind that came not from fear, but from memory. "Let's finish this," he said. And together, they vanished into the dusk. Mercer Butcher's voice cut sharp across the courtyard, echoing off the canyon wall. He held Widow Calder tight, one arm locked around her throat, the barrel of her own rifle jammed beneath her jaw. The stranger stood 10 paces away, empty hands raised. Dust swirled between them, kicked by the dying wind. His coat flapped slow. Judgment stood behind him, still as stone, reins slack. 3 bodies already lay cooling in the dirt, Mercer's men. The last 2 had run when the shots started. Now, it was just the 3 of them, and a ledge that dropped into Widow's Bluff, 100 feet of sheer fall behind them. "You ain't law," Mercer growled. "Ain't hero, either." The stranger didn't answer. His eyes didn't leave the woman. Mercer yanked her closer. "You think this is justice? Calder's dead. This land's mine now. You're not talking it back with some ghost horse and a stare." Widow Calder's voice came out dry. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Mercer barked a laugh. "I'm to fix that now." The stranger took 1 step forward. Mercer jammed the barrel harder against her neck. "I said drop it." "I already did," the stranger said. In a single motion, he twisted. From behind his back came a flash of metal. not a revolver. A combat knife, short and curved, blackened by fire. It flew through the air in a whisper. Mercer shouted, flinched, the blade buried in his forearm. The rifle clattered to the ground. Widow Calder twisted free and dropped low. The stranger surged forward, closed the gap, and drove his shoulder into Mercer's chest. The two men slammed against the rail at the edge of the bluff. Wood cracked. Gravel shifted beneath their boots. Mercer drew a hidden pistol, cocked it point blank. The stranger caught his wrist, their faces inches apart now. "You military?" Mercer spat. "No," the stranger said, breath steady. "Worse." He wrenched the pistol free and slammed it into Mercer's jaw. The outlaw staggered backward. One boot slipped over the edge. "Wait!" Too late. Mercer's cry echoed down the bluff as he vanished into the gorge. Silence returned, save for the wind and the hiss of hot iron cooling in the dirt. Widow stood slowly, brushing blood from her cheek. He walked to her, handed back the rifle. "You all right?" She nodded. "You've been worse." They turned toward the ranch. The sun was rising behind it, bleeding red through the canyon mouth. Behind them, Judgment neighed once, then went quiet.